Picture this. It's a Tuesday morning in Shanghai. The sun rises over the Yangshan Deep Water Port, the largest automated container terminal on Earth. Cranes taller than skyscrapers move in perfect synchronization. No human operators, just algorithms and steel. In 60 seconds, this port processes more cargo than some entire countries handle in a week. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, it's Monday evening in Los Angeles. The port of LA sits half empty. Trucks idle in long queues. Paperwork piles up. Systems built in the 1970s struggle to keep pace with modern demand. This isn't a story about efficiency. It's a story about power. Economic power. The kind that shapes the world for generations. And right now, while everyone's distracted by political theater and social media wars, the largest economic transition in human history is happening in plain sight. China isn't challenging America's economic dominance anymore. It's replacing it. Quietly, methodically, irreversibly. And here's what nobody's telling you. This isn't about military strength or political ideology. It's about something far more fundamental. Production capacity, infrastructure, supply chains, the unglamorous machinery that actually runs the global economy. The world's economic center of gravity is shifting east, and most people won't realize it until it's already happened. Before we go deeper into how this is unfolding, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button right now. Because what you're about to hear contradicts everything mainstream media tells you about the global economy. This channel exists to show you what's really happening behind the headlines. The patterns the establishment doesn't want you to see. And if you value the truth over comfortable lies, you belong here. So subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment telling me if you think America can reverse this trend or if it's already too late. Now let's talk about what's really happening. The narrative you hear everywhere goes like this. America is the world's largest economy. The dollar dominates global finance. American innovation leads the world. China's growth is slowing down. Their debt bubble is about to burst. The Communist Party's control will eventually collapse the whole system. Every word of that is designed to make you feel comfortable, to keep you from seeing the tectonic shift happening beneath your feet. Here's the reality. Economic power isn't about GDP numbers or stock market valuations. Those are lagging indicators. Scoreboard statistics that tell you what already happened. Real economic power is about production. The ability to make things, to build things, to supply the world with what it needs. And by that measure, China isn't catching up to America. It already passed it. Years ago. Consider this. China produces more steel than the rest of the world combined. Not just more than America. More than every other country on Earth added together. In 2023, China manufactured over 1 billion tons of steel. The United States produced 86 million tons. That's not a competition. It's not even close. Steel is the backbone of industrial civilization. It builds cities, ships, cars, machines, infrastructure. Everything that matters in the physical world requires steel. And China controls that supply. But it goes deeper. China produces 70% of the world's smartphones, 60% of the world's appliances, half of the world's computers, more than half of all solar panels, nearly 80% of global battery production for electric vehicles. Walk into any store in America. Look at where products come from. Clothing, electronics, furniture, tools, toys. Even the American flags sold at 4th of July celebrations are made in China. This isn't about cheap labor anymore. That narrative is a decade out of date. China has moved far beyond being the world's sweatshop. They're now leaders in advanced manufacturing, robotics, artificial intelligence applications in industry, high-speed rail technology, 5G infrastructure, quantum computing research. The gap isn't closing, it's widening. And here's the part that should terrify American policymakers. China didn't achieve this by accident. This is the result of long-term strategic planning that America abandoned decades ago. Let's go back to 1978. Deng Xiaoping opens China to market reforms. The West celebrates. Finally, China is embracing capitalism. They'll become democratic, we told ourselves. Economic freedom leads to political freedom. That was the theory. Except China had a different plan. They studied what happened to the Soviet Union. How shock therapy and rapid privatization destroyed Russia's industrial base. How Western advisors convinced Gorbachev to dismantle the planned economy before building market institutions. The result was economic collapse, oligarchy, and national humiliation. China learned from that mistake. They maintained state control over strategic sectors. They allowed market competition but within boundaries set by the Communist Party. They invited Western companies to build factories in China but required technology transfer. They sent millions of students to Western universities who then returned home with cutting-edge knowledge. Most importantly, they played the long game. While American CEOs obsessed over quarterly earnings reports, Chinese planners thought in decades. 5-year plans, 10-year infrastructure projects, 50-year strategic visions. The West called it authoritarian, inefficient, corrupt, doomed to fail. Except it didn't fail. It worked. Better than anyone predicted. By 2001, China joins the World Trade Organization. American politicians promise this will benefit everyone. Free trade raises all boats. China will buy American goods. American consumers get cheap products. Everybody wins. What actually happened was the fastest deindustrialization in American history. Factories closed. Entire industries relocated to China. Steel mills in Pennsylvania became rust and weeds. Textile plants in North Carolina shut down. Furniture manufacturing in the Midwest disappeared. 60,000 American factories closed between 2001 and 2020. 5 million manufacturing jobs vanished. Towns that once thrived became economic wastelands. But Wall Street celebrated. Corporate profits soared. Stock buybacks enriched shareholders. CEOs got massive bonuses for cutting costs by moving production overseas. And China accumulated the manufacturing capacity that America gave away. This is the first pillar of China's rise. Production capacity transferred from the United States to China. Not stolen. Not taken by force. Handed over voluntarily by American corporations chasing short-term profits. The second pillar is infrastructure. Let's talk about what China has built in the last 20 years. The world's largest high-speed rail network. Over 40,000 kilometers of track. Trains traveling 350 kilometers per hour connecting every major city. America has 0 kilometers of true high-speed rail. China built more than 100 airports in the last decade. Massive modern facilities with automated systems and efficient design. America struggles to renovate airports built 50 years ago. China constructed the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. 55 kilometers long. The longest sea crossing in the world. Tunnels, artificial islands, engineering on a scale America hasn't attempted since the interstate highway system. They built entire cities from scratch. Shenzhen went from a fishing village in 1980 to a metropolis of 13 million people today. A technology hub rivaling Silicon Valley. Gleaming skyscrapers, advanced infrastructure, innovation centers. All in 40 years. America can't build a single mile of subway in New York without years of delays and billions in cost overruns. This infrastructure isn't just impressive. It's strategic. It enables economic activity that wouldn't otherwise be possible. Fast transportation of goods. Efficient movement of workers. Reduced logistics costs. Increased productivity. China's infrastructure is a competitive advantage that compounds over time. And then there's the Belt and Road Initiative, the largest infrastructure project in human history. China investing over $1 trillion in roads, ports, railways, and energy projects across 70 countries. Critics call it debt trap diplomacy. They say China is buying influence by lending money to poor countries that can't pay it back. Maybe. But here's what's undeniable. China is building the infrastructure that will define global trade for the next century. They're financing ports in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Greece, and Kenya. Railways across Southeast Asia and Central Asia. Power plants in Africa and South America. Every project increases China's economic connectivity with the world. Every port handles Chinese goods. Every railway carries Chinese products. Every power plant uses Chinese technology. This is economic integration on a scale America never attempted, even at the height of its power. The Marshall Plan rebuilt Europe after World War II. It cost $13 billion. About $150 billion in today's money. The Belt and Road dwarfs it. Not even close. And here's the crucial difference. The Marshall Plan was primarily about stopping communism. Ideological. Defensive. The Belt and Road is about building the infrastructure for Chinese economic dominance. Practical. Offensive. Now let's address what you're thinking. China's economy is slowing down. Their real estate sector is collapsing. Debt levels are unsustainable. Youth unemployment is soaring. The demographic crisis from the one-child policy will cripple growth. All of that is true. China faces serious structural problems. But here's what matters. Economic transitions aren't about which country has zero problems. They're about which country is better positioned for the future. And by that measure, China's problems are manageable compared to America's. Let's talk about the real estate crisis everyone points to. Yes, Chinese property developers over-leveraged. Yes, there are ghost cities and unfinished projects. Yes, household wealth is tied up in property that may never deliver returns. This is a serious problem. But it's not an existential crisis. China's government has the tools and willingness to manage this. They can restructure debt. They can recapitalize banks. They can prevent systemic collapse through state intervention. You might not like that approach. You might think it violates free market principles. But it works. Compare that to America's 2008 financial crisis. The U.S. government had to bail out banks. Millions lost their homes. Unemployment spiked. The recovery took years. And the underlying problems, excessive financialization, wealth inequality, haven't been fixed. They've gotten worse. China's real estate problem is painful but containable. America's structural problems are far deeper. Let's talk about those. America's economy is built on consumption. 70% of GDP comes from consumer spending. That sounds good until you realize what it actually means. Americans buy things, mostly made somewhere else. They pay for it with borrowed money. Credit cards, auto loans, student debt, mortgages. The average American household carries over $90,000 in debt. The federal government carries $34 trillion in debt. And rising. This model worked when America was the world's manufacturer. When Ford built cars in Detroit and sold them globally. When U.S. Steel supplied the world. When American products dominated global markets. But that's not the world we live in anymore. Now America imports more than it exports. The trade deficit runs nearly $1 trillion a year. That means America buys more from the world than it sells to the world. Every single year. To sustain this, America borrows. From China, Japan, and other countries buying U.S. Treasury bonds. This creates a bizarre situation. China makes products. America buys them. America pays with dollars. China takes those dollars and lends them back to America. So America can keep buying Chinese products. It's a cycle that only works as long as the world accepts dollars. And that's the third pillar of China's strategy. Dollarization. For decades, the US dollar has been the world's reserve currency. Oil trades in dollars. International contracts denominated in dollars. Central banks hold dollars as reserves. This gives America enormous power. It can print money without causing immediate inflation because global demand for dollars absorbs the new supply. It can sanction countries by cutting them off from dollar-based financial systems. It can run massive deficits because the world needs dollars to function. But this only works if the world continues to trust and need the dollar. And that's changing. China has spent years building alternatives. The yuan is now used in 30% of China's cross-border transactions, up from 0 a decade ago. China and Russia trade in their own currencies, bypassing the dollar entirely. China and Saudi Arabia are discussing yuan-denominated oil sales. If that happens, it breaks the petrodollar system that has anchored American financial dominance since the 1970s. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are exploring a common currency for trade. That's 40% of the world's population, a quarter of global GDP. If they reduce dollar dependence, American power erodes. This isn't happening overnight. De-dollarization is a slow process, but it's happening. Every percentage point of global trade that shifts away from the dollar weakens America's position. And here's the kicker. America is accelerating this process. Every time the U.S. weaponizes the dollar through sanctions, it gives other countries an incentive to find alternatives. When the U.S. froze Russian central bank reserves after the Ukraine invasion, every country in the world took note. If America can do that to Russia, it can do it to anyone. China watched carefully. So did Saudi Arabia, India, Brazil, and dozens of others. The message was clear. Holding dollars is a political risk. Diversify. And they are. Now let's talk about the fourth pillar: technology and innovation. The narrative says America leads the world in technology. Silicon Valley, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon. Innovation happens here. That's partly true, but it's increasingly outdated. China isn't just copying Western technology anymore. They're innovating in critical areas. Take electric vehicles. BYD, a Chinese company, sold more electric vehicles than Tesla in 2023. Chinese EV makers dominate their home market and are expanding globally. They offer advanced features at lower prices than Western competitors. Battery technology, the core of EV performance, is overwhelmingly Chinese. ATL, a Chinese company, produces a third of the world's EV batteries. Better performance, lower cost, faster charging. Or consider 5G. Huawei leads the world in 5G technology. More patents than any Western company. More installations globally. The US banned Huawei from American networks, citing security concerns. Maybe legitimate. Maybe protectionism. Either way, it didn't stop Huawei. They dominate 5G deployment in Asia, Africa, and parts of Europe. The infrastructure that will carry the next generation of internet traffic is largely Chinese. Artificial intelligence. China publishes more AI research papers than any other country. Chinese companies lead in facial recognition, natural language processing in Mandarin, and AI applications in manufacturing. The US still has advantages in foundational AI research. But China is closing the gap fast. And they have something America doesn't. Massive amounts of data from a population of 1.4 billion people with fewer privacy restrictions. Data is the fuel for machine learning. China has more of it. Quantum computing. China achieved quantum supremacy in certain experimental setups. They launched the world's first quantum communications satellite. They're investing billions in quantum research. This is the technology that could make current encryption obsolete. Whoever leads in quantum computing has an enormous strategic advantage. Right now, it's a race. And China is not behind. Then there's space technology. China landed a rover on the far side of the moon. The first country to do so. They're building a space station. They're planning lunar bases. They're developing reusable rockets. America still leads in space through NASA and private companies like SpaceX. But the gap is narrowing. And China's space program is state-directed with long-term goals, not dependent on quarterly earnings or political whims. Here's the broader point. Technology leadership isn't permanent. Britain led the Industrial Revolution. Then Germany surged ahead in chemicals and engineering. Then America dominated the 20th century through electronics, aerospace, and computing. Now the center is shifting again. Not completely. Not overnight. But unmistakably. China is becoming a technology power in its own right. And this brings us to the fifth pillar: education and human capital. China graduates 4 times as many STEM students as America every year. Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. The fields that drive modern economies. Over 4 million Chinese students earn STEM degrees annually. America produces around 1 million. Yes, American universities are still world-class. But most benefit from foreign students. And many of those students are Chinese. They study at MIT, Stanford, Caltech. Then many return to China, bringing knowledge and networks with them. China has also invested heavily in domestic universities. Tsinghua University and Peking University now rank among the world's best in engineering and sciences. Chinese research output has exploded. In 2000, China produced fewer scientific papers than Spain. By 2020, China published more research papers than the United States. Not all are high quality, but the volume and improvement trajectory are undeniable. China is also focusing on vocational training, producing millions of skilled workers in manufacturing, logistics, and technical fields. These aren't glamorous jobs, but they're essential for a production-based economy. America, by contrast, has neglected vocational training for decades. The cultural message is clear. Everyone should go to college. Trade schools are for people who couldn't make it academically. The result is a shortage of electricians, plumbers, welders, and machinists. Jobs that pay well and can't be outsourced. Meanwhile, America produces an abundance of graduates with degrees in fields that don't translate to economic productivity. Nothing against liberal arts. But an economy needs engineers, not just marketers. China understood this. They built an education system aligned with their economic strategy. America has an education system that produces debt and underemployment. The sixth pillar is resource security. China is securing access to the resources that will define the 21st century economy. Rare earth elements. Lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, oil and natural gas. China controls 70% of global rare earth processing. These elements are critical for electronics, batteries, and military technology. America has rare earth deposits, but almost no processing capacity. We send raw materials to China. They refine them and sell them back as finished products. Lithium and cobalt are essential for batteries. China has locked up supplies through investments in mines in Australia, Chile, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Chinese companies don't just buy the materials. They own the mines. They control the supply chain from extraction to battery production. China is also the world's largest importer of oil. But they're not passively dependent. They've built strategic petroleum reserves. They've invested in oil fields in the Middle East, Africa, and South America. They've diversified suppliers to reduce vulnerability. And they're leading the transition to renewable energy. Not because they're environmentally virtuous. Because it reduces dependence on imported fossil fuels. China installed more solar panels in 2023 than America has in its entire history. They're building wind farms at a record pace. They're developing advanced nuclear reactors. The goal isn't just clean energy. It's energy independence. Whoever controls energy controls the future. China knows this. They're acting on it. America talks about it. Meanwhile, the seventh and final pillar. Geopolitical positioning. China is building alliances and partnerships that increase its influence while America's global position weakens. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization includes China, Russia, India, Pakistan, and Central Asian states. It's a political, economic, and security bloc covering a third of the world's population. BRICS expanded in 2023 to include Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, and others. These aren't formal alliances like NATO, but they signal a shift. Countries hedging their bets, recognizing that the future might not be American-dominated. China has also avoided the mistakes America made. America's foreign policy over the last 20 years has been military-focused. Wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Trillions spent. Thousands of lives lost. Little to show for it. Meanwhile, China built economic relationships. They didn't invade countries. They invested in them. They built infrastructure. They offered financing. No lectures about democracy or human rights. Just business. You can criticize that approach as amoral, and it is. But it's effective. Countries don't have to like China. They just have to find partnership with China beneficial. And many do. China is now the largest trading partner for over 120 countries. More than America. That means more countries depend on China economically than on the United States. When economic interests and political alliances diverge, economics usually wins. Countries might prefer American values, but they'll trade with whoever offers the best deal. And increasingly, that's China. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. None of this means China is morally superior. It doesn't mean their system is better for human freedom or dignity. China's government is authoritarian. Surveillance state. Repression of dissent. Human rights abuses in Xinjiang. Crushing of democracy in Hong Kong. These are facts. And they matter. But they don't change the economic reality. Economic power doesn't require moral legitimacy. History proves this repeatedly. The British Empire dominated the 19th century while running colonial extraction economies and enforcing brutal policies. America rose to dominance in the 20th century despite segregation, labor exploitation, and overseas interventions. Power and virtue don't always align. China's rise is happening not because they're good, but because they've executed a long-term economic strategy more effectively than America. So what does this mean for the future? Let's be clear about what we're not saying. This is not a prediction that America will collapse. The United States remains enormously powerful. Largest military by far. Most advanced financial markets. Leading universities. Cultural influence through movies, music, and technology brands. A tradition of innovation and entrepreneurship. All of that is real. But economic dominance is different from economic leadership. Britain didn't collapse when it lost its position as the world's leading economy. It just became less central. That's what's happening to America. A transition from dominance to being one major power among several. And here's the part most people miss. This transition is not dramatic. There's no single moment when China overtakes America. No clear finish line. It's a gradual shift in the center of gravity. One day, historians will look back and identify a period when China became the world's primary economic engine. But people living through it won't notice a single decisive moment. Just a slow accumulation of changes. More trade conducted in yuan. More infrastructure projects financed by Chinese banks. More technology standards set by Chinese companies. More global supply chains dependent on Chinese manufacturing. Each change is small. Together, they represent a transformation. Consider how American dominance emerged. The U.S. surpassed Britain economically around 1890. But Britain remained the global superpower until after World War II. 50 years of transition. During that time, America built the industrial base, financial systems, and global networks that would define the 20th century. Britain didn't collapse. It just gradually became less central. The pound gave way to the dollar. British companies faced American competition. British global influence declined. By 1950, the transition was obvious. But it happened slowly. The same process is underway now. China won't replace America overnight. But in 20 or 30 years, the world will look very different. Beijing will be more influential than Washington in many regions. The yuan will play a larger role in global finance. Chinese technology standards will be widely adopted. Supply chains will be built around China's manufacturing base. This isn't about liking or disliking China. It's about recognizing reality. And here's the most important question. Can America reverse this? Technically, yes. But it would require a fundamental shift in priorities and policies. America would need to reindustrialize. Bring manufacturing back. Not for cheap consumer goods, but for high-value production and strategic industries. Semiconductors, batteries, pharmaceuticals, advanced materials. This requires massive investment. Not just government spending, but private capital directed toward productive assets instead of financial speculation. It requires patience. Building a factory takes years. Training a workforce takes years. Developing supply chains takes years. America's political and economic system is not designed for that kind of long-term planning. Elections every 2 years. Corporate leadership focused on quarterly results. Capital markets that reward short-term gains. These structures make long-term industrial policy nearly impossible. China's system, whatever its flaws, allows for long-term planning. The Communist Party doesn't worry about midterm elections. State-owned enterprises can pursue goals beyond immediate profitability. That's an advantage in economic competition. America would also need to rebuild infrastructure. Roads, bridges, ports, rail, broadband. The basics that enable commerce. The American Society of Civil Engineers gives U.S. infrastructure a C- grade. Fixing it would cost trillions. There's no political will for that level of spending. Every infrastructure bill becomes a political battle. Projects get delayed, downsized, or canceled. Meanwhile, China builds. America would need to fix its education system. Produce more engineers and scientists. Make college affordable so students don't graduate with crippling debt. Invest in vocational training so the country has skilled tradespeople. None of this is happening at the necessary scale. America would need a coherent industrial policy. Government and private sector working together to build strategic industries. This goes against free market ideology that has dominated American policy for 40 years. The idea that government should pick winners and losers is seen as un-American. But China does it, and it works. South Korea did it, and became an advanced economy. Japan did it, and rebuilt after World War II to become an economic powerhouse. America did it during World War II and the Cold War. The government directed resources toward strategic goals, built industries, funded research. It worked then. It could work now. But it requires admitting that pure free markets don't always produce optimal outcomes for national strategy. That's ideologically difficult for many Americans to accept. So the most likely scenario is that America continues on its current path. Incremental adjustments. Rhetoric about competing with China. But no fundamental change in strategy. Meanwhile, China continues building. The gap widens. And in a generation, the world's economic center will have shifted decisively. Let's be concrete about what this looks like. Imagine it's 2045. Your kids are adults. What does the world look like? Most consumer electronics are designed in China. Not just manufactured, but designed. Chinese brands dominate global markets. The way Japanese brands did in the 1980s, and American brands did before that. The cars people drive are increasingly Chinese EVs. BYD, Geely, NIO. Affordable, high-tech, better batteries than legacy Western brands. Major infrastructure projects around the world are financed by Chinese banks and built by Chinese companies. High-speed rail in Southeast Asia. Ports in Africa. Smart cities in the Middle East. All using Chinese technology and standards. The apps people use for payments, social media, and communication include Chinese platforms that have expanded globally. The way American apps dominated the 2000s and 2010s. Universities in Beijing and Shanghai attract top talent from around the world. The way American universities did in the 20th century. The yuan is widely used in international trade. Not replacing the dollar entirely, but sharing reserve currency status. Countries hold yuan reserves. Oil trades in yuan. Loans denominated in yuan. American influence in international institutions like the UN, IMF, and World Bank has diminished. Not because America left, but because other countries, led by China, have more economic weight and demand more say. This doesn't mean America is poor or irrelevant. It means America is no longer the undisputed center of the global economy. Just like Britain remained wealthy and influential after losing its top position. But the world doesn't revolve around America anymore. For Americans, this is psychologically difficult. Generations grew up in a world where American dominance was assumed. The idea that this could change feels threatening. But for most of the world, this is just a return to historical norms. For most of human history, China and India were the world's largest economies. The West's dominance over the last 2 centuries is the anomaly, not the norm. The 21st century might simply be a reversion to the mean. Asia rising. The West becoming relatively less central. This isn't good or bad. It just is. Now let's talk about what you should do with this information. First, understand that this isn't about panic. It's about perspective. If you're an investor, consider what a China-centric global economy means for your portfolio. Diversification beyond U.S. assets. Exposure to Asian markets. Companies positioned to benefit from China's growth. Not putting all your eggs in one basket. If you're planning a career, think about skills that remain valuable regardless of which country leads economically. Technology, engineering, healthcare, skilled trades. Abilities that can't be easily outsourced. If you're raising kids, consider what education prepares them for a multipolar world. Language skills, cultural literacy, adaptability. The world they inherit will be more complex than the one we grew up in. If you're a citizen, demand better from your leaders. Long-term thinking. Infrastructure investment. Education reform. Industrial policy that builds the future instead of managing decline. This isn't partisan. Both parties have failed on this front. And most importantly, let go of the assumption that America's position is permanent. Nothing is permanent. Empires rise and fall. Economic centers shift. This has happened repeatedly throughout history. It's happening again. Recognizing that doesn't make you unpatriotic. It makes you realistic. And realism is the first step toward adapting. Here's the deeper truth that nobody wants to say out loud. America's economic dominance was never going to last forever. The post-World War II order, where America was the world's factory, the world's bank, and the world's policeman, was an anomaly created by unique circumstances. Europe and Asia were destroyed by war. America's industrial base was untouched. The dollar became the reserve currency because it was backed by gold and economic might. American companies had no real competition. That world is gone. Europe rebuilt. Asia industrialized. Competition returned. And competition means America can't dominate forever. The mistake was assuming that temporary dominance was a permanent state. That American exceptionalism meant the rules of history didn't apply. But they do. Every empire that ever existed believed it would last forever. Rome. The Mongols, the Ottomans, the British, all thought their power was eternal. All eventually declined. Not because they were weak, but because power is dynamic. New challengers emerge. Advantages erode. The world changes. America is not exempt from this pattern. China's rise doesn't happen because China is better. It happens because China adapted to the realities of 21st century economics more effectively than America did. They built what matters. Infrastructure, manufacturing capacity, education systems aligned with economic needs, resource security, long-term strategy. America, meanwhile, spent decades financializing its economy, prioritizing short-term profits over long-term investment, allowing infrastructure to decay, letting education become unaffordable, outsourcing production to chase lower costs. These were choices, not inevitable. Choices made by policymakers, corporate leaders, and a society that preferred consumption over production. And now the consequences are unfolding. This isn't a morality tale. It's not about good guys and bad guys. It's about strategy and execution. China executed a long-term economic strategy effectively. America did not. That's the whole story. And here's the uncomfortable conclusion. By the time most people recognize this shift, it will already be irreversible. The patterns are visible now if you look, but they're not yet obvious to the mainstream. So most people will continue believing that America's economic dominance is secure, that China's problems will derail their rise, that the dollar's status is unshakable, that American innovation will always lead the world. These beliefs are comforting, but they're not based on the evidence. The evidence shows a world in transition. Economic power moving east. Manufacturing capacity concentrated in China. Infrastructure investment dwarfing what the West is doing. Technology leadership shifting in key areas. De-dollarization underway. Global trade reorienting around China. Each data point can be dismissed individually, but together they tell a clear story. The story of how China is quietly replacing the United States as the world's economic engine. Not through war, not through ideology, through production, through infrastructure, through patient, strategic execution. And unless something dramatic changes, this process will continue until the transition is complete. Future historians will look back at this period and wonder why it wasn't more obvious at the time. Why more people didn't see it happening. Why America didn't respond more decisively. The answer is simple. People don't want to believe their world is changing. It's easier to cling to familiar narratives than to confront uncomfortable realities. But reality doesn't care what you believe. It unfolds according to its own logic. And the logic of economic power is clear. Production matters more than consumption. Investment matters more than speculation. Long-term planning matters more than quarterly earnings. Physical infrastructure matters more than financial engineering. By those measures, China is winning. Not because they're smarter or better, but because they prioritize the things that matter for economic power. And America did not. That's the reality. You can argue with it. You can deny it. You can insist that America will always be number one. But the evidence points in one direction. And ignoring evidence doesn't change outcomes. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. Are you going to keep believing comfortable myths? Or are you going to face the reality of the world as it is, not as you wish it were? Because the world is changing, faster than most people realize. And those who recognize the change early will be better positioned than those who deny it until it's too late. This isn't about pessimism. It's about realism. And realism is the foundation for making good decisions. Whether you're investing, planning a career, raising a family, or just trying to understand the world you live in. Knowing where the world is headed matters. And the world is heading toward a China-centric economic order. Maybe not completely. Maybe not in every dimension. But more than it is today. And far more than most Americans are willing to admit. That's the truth. Uncomfortable. Difficult. But true. And the sooner you accept it, the better prepared you'll be for what comes next. Now let's talk about the implications beyond economics. Because economic power translates into other forms of influence. When China becomes the dominant economic force, it will reshape global culture, politics, and values. Not intentionally, not through propaganda, but through the subtle influence that economic power always exerts. Think about how American dominance shaped the world. English became the global language of business. American movies, music, and television spread worldwide. Blue jeans and Coca-Cola became universal symbols. American values, individualism, democracy, free markets, were promoted as universal ideals. Not because America forced them on the world, but because American economic and cultural power made them attractive. People wanted to emulate success. China's rise will have a similar effect. Already, Mandarin is being taught in schools around the world. Chinese apps like TikTok have hundreds of millions of users globally. Chinese movies are starting to compete internationally. Chinese fashion and design are gaining influence. This is just the beginning. As China's economic weight grows, so will its cultural footprint. Not through force, through attraction. And with that comes a shift in values. China's model, state-directed capitalism, authoritarian governance, collective over individual, will seem more legitimate to other countries, especially developing nations that see China's success and want to replicate it. Democracy and human rights, the values America promoted, will seem less universal. Just one option among many. This doesn't mean the whole world becomes authoritarian, but it means the ideological consensus that emerged after the Cold War, that liberal democracy is the only legitimate system, will break down. We're already seeing this. Countries that once seemed to be democratizing are backsliding. Authoritarian leaders are emboldened. The appeal of the China model is growing, not because people love authoritarianism, but because they want economic development. And China offers a path that seems to work. For America, this is a profound challenge. Not military, not economic, ideological. The belief that American values are universal and inevitable is being challenged. And there's no clear response. You can't bomb your way to ideological dominance. You can't sanction countries into adopting your values. You can only lead by example. And if your example is a country with crumbling infrastructure, political dysfunction, and growing inequality, the message is weakened. China's example, for all its flaws, is a country that built gleaming cities, modern infrastructure, and lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty. That's compelling, especially to countries still struggling with poverty and underdevelopment. So the implications of China's rise go far beyond economics. They touch on the fundamental question of what kind of world we live in. A world where democracy and human rights are seen as universal, or a world where different systems compete, and the most economically successful one wins adherence. We're moving toward the latter, and that has consequences for everyone, not just geopolitically, but in terms of the kind of future we're building. Now here's where it gets personal. You might be thinking, what does this mean for me? I'm not a policymaker or a CEO. I'm just trying to live my life. Why does this matter? It matters because the world you live in is shaped by these forces. The products you buy, the job opportunities available, the value of your savings, the quality of infrastructure, the security of your country. All of it is connected to the broader economic and geopolitical landscape. If America continues to decline relative to China, life in America will change. Not catastrophically, but gradually. Standards of living might stagnate. Opportunities might shrink. The sense of optimism and upward mobility that defined the American experience for generations might fade. That's already happening, by the way. Younger generations are less optimistic about their economic futures than their parents were. And they're right to be. The world their parents grew up in, where America dominated and opportunities were abundant, is disappearing. The new world is more competitive, more multipolar, more uncertain. Understanding that doesn't make you powerless. It makes you informed. And informed people make better decisions. So here's what you do. Educate yourself. Don't rely on mainstream narratives that tell you everything is fine. Look at the data. Follow independent analysts who aren't beholden to political or corporate interests. Understand the trends. Diversify. Don't put all your faith in one country, one currency, one system. Spread your risk. Invest in skills that are valuable anywhere. Build networks that span borders. Adapt. The world is changing. Those who adapt thrive. Those who cling to the past struggle. Be flexible. Be open to new realities. And most importantly, let go of the need for your country to be number one. Patriotism doesn't require delusion. You can love your country and still recognize its limitations. You can want America to succeed without pretending it's invincible. In fact, real patriotism means wanting your country to face reality and adapt. Not burying your head in the sand and pretending everything is fine. Because everything is not fine. America is facing the most significant economic challenge in its history. And the outcome is not predetermined. America can adapt. It can rebuild. It can compete. But only if enough people recognize the reality and demand change. If people keep believing the comfortable myths, nothing will change. And the decline will continue. So this video isn't just about informing you. It's about challenging you to think differently, to see the world as it is, to demand better from your leaders and yourself. Because the future is not written. It's being written right now, by the choices we make. And the longer we wait to make the right choices, the harder it becomes to change course. That's the real message here. Not that China is unstoppable, but that America is running out of time to respond effectively. And if you care about the future, you need to start paying attention now, not later. Because later might be too late. This is the moment, the inflection point, where the trajectory of the 21st century is being set. And most people are sleepwalking through it. Don't be one of them. Wake up. Look around. See what's happening. And decide what you're going to do about it. Because doing nothing is a choice. And it's the worst choice you can make. The world is changing. The only question is whether you're going to change with it, or get left behind. Your move. The information is out there. The patterns are clear. The future is taking shape. All that's left is for you to decide. Do you accept reality? Or do you cling to the past? One path leads to adaptation and resilience. The other leads to confusion and decline. Choose wisely. Because the world won't wait for you to catch up. It's moving forward. With or without you. And that's the hard truth about economic transitions. They don't care about your feelings. They don't care about your national pride. They don't care about your comfort. They just happen, according to their own inexorable logic. And that logic says China is rising. America is declining in relative terms. And the world is being remade. You can fight that reality. Or you can understand it and navigate it. That's your choice. But make no mistake. The transition is happening. The only question is how prepared you'll be when it's complete. So take this seriously. Not as doom and gloom. But as a roadmap. A way to understand the world you're living in. And a call to action. To build the future you want to see. Instead of passively accepting the future that's being built for you. That's power. Real power. Not the power of nations. But the power of individuals who refuse to be passive observers. Who see the world clearly. And act accordingly. Be that person. Because the world needs more people who think critically. Who see beyond the headlines. Who understand the deeper currents shaping our future. That's what this channel is about. Cutting through the noise. Showing you the patterns. Giving you the tools to understand what's really happening. Not what you're told is happening. So if this resonated with you, I need you to do something right now. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Because this is just the beginning of a much larger conversation. We're going to keep exploring these shifts, these power transitions, these uncomfortable truths that shape your world. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. Because we're going deeper. Into the collapse of the petrodollar. Into what happens when the dollar loses reserve status. Into the real consequences of deindustrialization. Into the technology race that will define the next decade. All of it is connected. And all of it matters more than you realize. Drop a comment and tell me. Do you think America can reverse this trend? Or is the transition to a China-centric world already inevitable? I want to hear your perspective. Because this isn't just about information. It's about dialogue. About understanding these forces together. And thank you for watching, for thinking, for being the kind of person who doesn't just accept the narratives you're fed. The world needs more of that. More critical thinking. More courage to face uncomfortable truths. And I'll be here, digging into the stories that matter. The patterns that shape our future. The realities that most people are too afraid to confront. Until next time. Keep your eyes open. Keep questioning. And I'll see you in the next one.